How can you tell if an avoidant still thinks about you when they never say it directly? Avoidants don't express continued interest the way other people do, making it difficult to know if you're still in their thoughts or completely forgotten. Knowing whether an avoidant still thinks about you requires reading specific behavioral patterns rather than waiting for them to tell you. These patterns reveal their internal state, even when their words say nothing. In this video, you'll learn the behaviors signs that indicate an avoidant still thinks about you, how to distinguish real mental engagement from casual curiosity, and how to read these patterns without creating false narratives. If you're trying to figure out whether you're still in their thoughts or they've completely moved on, what comes next matters. The first clear indicator shows up in how an avoidant monitors your social media. When someone still thinks about you, they maintain consistent observation without direct interaction. They view your stories regularly, but rarely react to the content. They check your posts with notable frequency, but don't leave comments or likes. This pattern of watching without engaging reveals their internal conflict. They want to stay connected to your life enough to keep checking, but they also need to maintain the emotional distance that makes them feel safe. The monitoring behavior represents a middle ground between these two opposing needs. Someone who genuinely moved on either stops checking entirely or interacts normally when they do look. The combination of frequent viewing with zero engagement signals ongoing mental investment. The type of content they pay attention to matters significantly in revealing whether you're still on their mind. Avoidants who continue thinking about someone show increased checking behavior after certain types of posts. When you share content showing happiness, new activities, or personal growth, their viewing patterns intensify in the following days. Posts that suggest you might be dating someone new or making major life changes draw their focus even when they don't respond. This selective attention indicates they're tracking not just your general updates, but specifically your emotional state and availability. They're monitoring whether you're moving forward, whether you seem content without them, and whether other people are entering your life. This goes beyond polite interest in an ex-partner's well-being. The pattern shows they're still processing the relationship and their decision to create distance. Their communication patterns expose continued thinking through specific timing and content choices. An avoidant still mentally engaged with you will have long periods of silence interrupted by seemingly random contact. They might send something that reminded them of an inside joke, share a meme you'd find funny, or ask a question that doesn't actually need an answer. These messages serve primarily to re-establish their presence in your awareness rather than to exchange real information. The timing often coincides with moments when they sense you might be moving on. If your social media suggests you're doing well or potentially dating, suddenly a message appears. If you've been quiet online for a while, they reach out with something casual. This pattern reveals they're paying enough attention to notice changes in your life and responding to those changes with contact designed to remind you they still exist. The content of these occasional messages reveals more than their frequency. Avoidants who still think about you reference shared experiences, bring up memories from your time together, or mention things only someone who knew you well would remember. They're not making generic small talk. They're demonstrating that the relationship occupies enough mental space that these references come to mind naturally. Someone who moved on completely would either not reach out at all or keep any necessary communication purely functional. The inclusion of personal references, humor tied to your history, or acknowledgement of things specific to your connection shows you're still part of their active mental landscape. How they respond when you initiate contact provides another clear indicator of whether you remain in their thoughts. An avoidant still thinking about you will respond relatively quickly, despite their general pattern of distance. They might take hours to reply to keep up the appearance of detachment, but they don't ignore you completely or take days to respond. Their responses contain more detail than necessary for basic politeness. They ask follow-up questions or extend the conversation slightly beyond what simple courtesy requires. This behavior contradicts their usual pattern of minimal engagement because part of them wants the interaction to continue, even while another part maintains boundaries. Someone who truly moved on either wouldn't respond at all or would keep their replies brief and purely informational without any conversational extension. Their behavior around mutual friends reveals whether you occupy their mental space. Avoidant, still thinking about someone, ask casual questions about that person's life when talking to shared connections. They frame these questions as polite interest rather than genuine concern, asking how you're doing in a way that sounds offhand rather than invested. They bring you up in conversation with mutual friends more often than someone who moved on would. They also show increased interest in social events or gatherings where you might be present. They ask who's attending before committing to plans or find reasons to show up at places where you're likely to be. This pattern of maintaining awareness of your social presence through indirect channels shows you're still a reference point in their decision-making. Physical proximity creates another set of telling behaviors when an avoidant still thinks about you. In situations where you end up in the same space, they position themselves where they can see you without being too close. They don't avoid the location entirely, but they also don't approach directly. Their body language shows awareness of your presence through small adjustments in posture or position when you move. They track your location in the room without making it obvious. They laugh slightly louder when you're nearby or engage more energetically in conversations when you're within hearing distance. These behaviors indicate they want you to notice them without having to initiate direct contact. Someone who moved on would either show genuine indifference to your presence or feel comfortable approaching normally. The way an avoidant handles seeing you with potential new romantic interests exposes whether you're still on their mind. Their reaction goes beyond casual observation. They might leave the situation earlier than planned or suddenly seem less engaged in whatever they were doing. Their mood visibly shifts when they notice you with someone else. They might increase their own social behavior, appearing more animated or friendly with others nearby, as if performing for your benefit. They could also become quieter and more withdrawn, processing what they're seeing internally. Both reactions indicate emotional investment. Someone genuinely indifferent would register the information without any notable change in their behavior or energy. How they talk about the relationship when it comes up in conversation shows whether they've mentally moved on. Avoidants still thinking about you avoid definitive statements about it being completely over. They use language that leaves possibility open, saying things like, "Right now we're not together," rather than, "We broke up," or "It's over." They don't speak negatively about you to mutual friends. They might explain the separation as being about timing, circumstances, or needing space rather than fundamental incompatibility. This language choice reveals they haven't closed the door mentally, even if they've created physical distance. Someone who moved on speaks about the relationship in past tense with finality and doesn't leave interpretive room for future possibility. Their response to your absence from usual places or activities indicates whether you remain in their thoughts. If you stop attending social events you both used to go to, an avoidant still thinking about you will notice and might ask others about your absence. They show awareness of changes in your patterns and routines. They remember details about your schedule or habits that someone truly detached wouldn't retain. When you do reappear after being absent, they react with noticeable energy shift, either becoming more animated or more reserved, depending on their processing style. This awareness of your presence and absence patterns reveals you're still a significant point of reference in their mental map. The frequency with which they bring up future possibilities, even vaguely, shows continued mental engagement. An avoidant still thinking about you might mention future events in a way that doesn't exclude you, saying things like, "Maybe we'll run into each other at that thing," or "You'd probably like that new place that opened." They don't make concrete plans, but they also don't speak about their future as if you definitely won't be part of it. This linguistic ambiguity reflects their internal state where they haven't decided you're permanently out of their life, even though they've created current distance. Someone who moved on speaks about their future without any reference to you or shared experiences. How they handle items or connections that tie them to you reveals whether you occupy their mental space. Avoidants still thinking about someone keep meaningful items from the relationship rather than immediately clearing everything out. They maintain connections on social media rather than unfollowing or blocking. They don't delete photos or remove all evidence of your time together. This preservation of connections and physical reminders indicates they're not ready to fully close that chapter. Someone genuinely moving on typically removes these reminders as part of their process, either immediately or gradually, but the removal happens. The continued presence of these connections and items shows the relationship still holds meaning in their present awareness. Their behavior during significant dates or occasions connected to your history together exposes ongoing thought patterns. Avoidants still mentally engaged with you often reach out around meaningful anniversaries, birthdays, or dates that held significance in your relationship. Even if the message is brief or seems casual, the timing isn't coincidental. They remember these dates because you remain present enough in their thoughts that these markers still register emotionally. They might also show changes in their social media activity around these dates, either posting more or going silent. These patterns indicate they're processing the significance of these occasions in relation to you. Someone who moved on either doesn't remember these dates or feels no compulsion to acknowledge them. The way they respond to information about your well-being reveals their level of continued thinking. When mutual friends mention you're going through something difficult, an avoidant still invested shows concern even if they don't reach out directly. They might ask follow-up questions or show visible reaction to the information. If they hear you accomplished something positive, they have emotional response to that news, either genuine happiness or possible discomfort, depending on their processing state. These reactions to second-hand information about your life indicate you remain emotionally significant. Someone who moved on might react politely, but without genuine emotional engagement to updates about your life. Their digital behavior patterns provide consistent data about whether you're on their mind. Beyond social media viewing, they might interact with content you've shared publicly, like articles or music recommendations, without directly engaging with you. They visit your profiles on various platforms with enough frequency to notice updates and changes. They might even make changes to their own profiles or content that seem designed to get your attention or communicate something to you indirectly. These digital breadcrumbs create a trail showing you're part of their active mental landscape, even during periods of no direct contact. Reading these patterns accurately requires distinguishing between genuine ongoing attachment and other motivations that can look similar. Ego protection can drive monitoring behavior without real emotional investment. An avoidant might check on you to confirm they made the right decision or to reassure themselves that you're not doing better without them. Habit can also create patterns that resemble continued interest. Someone might check your social media automatically without genuine emotional engagement, the same way people check the same apps repeatedly throughout the day. The key difference shows up in emotional reaction. Genuine continued thinking creates visible emotional responses when they encounter information about you. Their energy shifts, their behavior changes, and they show investment in what's happening in your life beyond passive observation. The consistency of patterns over time reveals authentic mental engagement versus temporary curiosity. An avoidant still thinking about you maintains these behaviors over weeks and months, not just the immediate aftermath of separation. The monitoring continues, the occasional contact persists, and the awareness of your life remains active over extended periods. Someone experiencing only temporary curiosity or ego concerns shows declining engagement over time. Their checking becomes less frequent, their responses become more perfunctory, and their awareness of your life fades naturally. Sustained patterns over months indicate genuine ongoing mental and emotional investment rather than short-term processing of the separation. Context significantly affects the interpretation of these signs. The circumstances of your separation influence what behaviors mean. If the avoidant ended things specifically because of life circumstances rather than relationship problems, their continued engagement might reflect unresolved feelings about the timing rather than about you specifically. If they ended things during a period of high stress or life transition, their monitoring might indicate they're reconsidering that decision as their situation stabilizes. The duration of your relationship also matters. Longer relationships with deeper connection create stronger mental patterns that take more time to fade, so continued thinking after a significant relationship means something different than after a brief dating period. Your own behavior influences what you're able to observe about whether an avoidant still thinks about you. If you maintain frequent contact or initiate regularly, you can't accurately read whether they would reach out on their own. If you comment on all their posts or react to their content constantly, you can't know if they would seek that interaction independently. Creating space allows their natural patterns to emerge. This doesn't mean completely disappearing or playing games, but rather pulling back enough that their authentic behavior becomes visible. The patterns that appear when you're not actively pursuing reveal their genuine mental state more accurately than anything that happens while you're in regular contact. Distinguishing between hoping they still think about you and accurately reading whether they do requires honest assessment. The desire for them to still be mentally engaged can make normal behaviors seem significant. A single story view becomes, "They're definitely watching me." A brief text becomes, "They're clearly not over this." The challenge is reading patterns without projecting desired meaning onto random events. Multiple consistent behaviors over time create reliable data. Single incidents or occasional contact might mean nothing beyond basic courtesy or momentary impulse. The accumulation of several patterns from this framework provides clearer indication than any individual sign. Their playlist or music choices sometimes reveal continued mental engagement in ways direct communication never would. Avoidants who still think about you might share songs that carry obvious meaning related to your relationship or separation. They create playlists that seem designed for you to notice, filled with tracks that reference themes relevant to what you experience together. They might even comment on or react to music you post, using songs as a safer way to communicate feelings they can't express directly. Music becomes a bridge for emotional expression when words feel too vulnerable. Someone who moved on doesn't use artistic expression to maintain connection or communicate indirectly about relationship feelings. The level of detail they retain about your life shows whether you occupy active mental space. An avoidant still thinking about you remembers small things you mentioned weeks or months ago. They bring up details from conversations that seemed insignificant at the time, proving they were paying closer attention than their demeanor suggested. They remember your preferences, your schedule changes, your family situations, and your work challenges with accuracy that goes beyond casual acquaintance memory. This retention happens because their mind naturally holds on to information about people who matter emotionally. Someone genuinely detached forgets these details quickly or never absorbed them deeply in the first place. Changes in their own life choices sometimes reflect continued mental engagement with you. An avoidant still processing the relationship might make decisions that seem influenced by your previous conversations or values you expressed. They might pursue interests you introduced them to or make life changes you had suggested. They could adopt perspectives you shared or start avoiding things you criticized. These behavioral adjustments indicate your viewpoint still carries weight in their decision-making process. They're continuing an internal dialogue with you even in your absence. Someone who moved on makes choices based entirely on their own current priorities without reference to a past partner's influence. How they handle mutual obligations or shared responsibilities reveals their mental state regarding you. If you have ongoing connections through work, friend groups, or practical matters, an avoidant still thinking about you handles these interactions with more care than necessary. They might go out of their way to make things easier for you or show consideration beyond what the situation requires. They remember commitments and follow through on shared responsibilities with attention that suggests you still matter. They might even create reasons to maintain these practical connections rather than finding ways to minimize them. Someone who moved on treats these obligations purely functionally without extra consideration or emotional investment. If you're recognizing several of these patterns consistently over time, there's strong indication you remain in their thoughts and they haven't fully detached. If you're seeing only occasional behaviors or having to stretch to make normal actions fit these patterns, they've likely begun moving on emotionally even if some residual awareness remains. The distinction matters for your own peace of mind and clarity about where things actually stand. Share in the comments which of these patterns you've noticed and whether they helped you read the situation more accurately. If this breakdown provided the clarity you needed, hit the like button and subscribe for more content on understanding relationship dynamics. Thanks for watching.